Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, fellow leaders, for all the immediate challenges that we gather to address this week, terrorism, instability, inequality, disease, there's one issue that will define the contours of this century more dramatically than any other, and that is the urgent and growing threat of a changing climate. 5 years have passed since many of us met in Copenhagen. And since then, our understanding of climate change has advanced, both in the deepening science that says this once distant threat has moved firmly into the present, and into the sting of more frequent extreme weather events that show us exactly what these changes may mean for future generations. No nation is immune. Worldwide, this summer was the hottest ever recorded, with global carbon emissions still on the rise. So the climate is changing faster than our efforts to address it. The alarm bells keep ringing.
Given the rise of so many wars and conflicts in Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, Gaza, and parts of Africa, the Pope said a third world war isn't far-fetched.
Anche oggi, dopo il secondo fallimento di un'altra guerra mondiale, forse si può parlare di una terza guerra combattuta a pezzi, con crimini, massacri, distruzioni. Come è possibile questo? È possibile perché anche oggi, dietro le quinte, ci sono interessi, piani geopolitici, avidità di denaro e di potere. C'è l'industria delle armi.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we come together at a crossroad between war and peace, between disorder and integration, between fear and hope. Around the globe, there are signposts of progress, and yet there is a pervasive unease in our world. A sense that the very forces that have brought us together have created new dangers and made it difficult for any single nation to insulate itself from global forces. As we gather here, an outbreak of Ebola overwhelms public health systems in West Africa and threatens to move rapidly across borders. Russian aggression in Europe recalls the days when large nations trampled small ones in pursuit of territorial ambition. The brutality of terrorists in Syria and Iraq forces us to look into the heart of darkness. Each of these problems demands urgent attention. Fellow delegates, we come together as United Nations with a choice to make. We can renew the international system that has enabled so much progress, or we can allow ourselves to be pulled back by an undertow of instability. We can reaffirm our collective responsibility to confront global problems, or be swamped by more and more outbreaks of instability. There's much that must be done to meet the test of this moment. But today I'd like to focus on two defining questions at the root of so many of our challenges. Whether the nations here today will be able to renew the purpose of the UN's founding, and whether we will come together to reject the cancer of violent extremism. 100 years ago, a world war claimed the lives of many millions, proving that with the terrible power of modern weaponry, the cause of empire ultimately leads to the graveyard. It would take another world war to roll back the forces of fascism, the notions of racial supremacy, and form this United Nations to ensure that no nation can subjugate its neighbors and claim their territory. Recently, Russia's actions in Ukraine challenge this post-war order. Here are the facts. After the people of Ukraine mobilized popular protests and calls for reform, their corrupt president fled. Against the will of the government in Kiev, Crimea was annexed. Russia poured arms into eastern Ukraine, fueling violent separatists, and a conflict that has killed thousands. When a civilian airliner was shot down from areas that these proxies controlled, they refused to allow access to the crash for days. When Ukraine started to reassert control over its territory, Russia gave up the pretense of merely supporting the separatists and moved troops across the border. This is a vision of the world in which might makes right. A world in which one nation's borders can be redrawn by another, and civilized people are not allowed to recover the remains of their loved ones because of the truth that might be revealed. As we speak, America is deploying our doctors and scientists, supported by our military, to help contain the outbreak of Ebola and pursue new treatments. But we need a broader effort to stop a disease that could kill hundreds of thousands, inflict horrific suffering, destabilize economies, and move rapidly across borders. It's easy to see this as a distant problem until it is not.
The UN Security Council has declared the Ebola outbreak in West Africa a threat to international peace and security. It's urging all-out global efforts to tackle the crisis.
A unanimous vote by the UN Security Council in a rare meeting on a public health crisis. Their resolution pledges more international support for the fight to stop the spread of Ebola. It's a fight the UN Secretary-General says the world is currently losing.
The outbreak is the largest the world has ever seen. The number of cases is doubling every 3 weeks. There will soon be more cases in Liberia alone than in the 4-decade history of the disease.
He's calling for a 20-fold increase in funding to combat Ebola, a total of $1 billion, and he's setting up a new UN mission.
And this unprecedented situation requires unprecedented steps to save lives and safeguard peace, security.
As we look to the future, one issue risks a cycle of conflict that could derail so much progress, and that is the cancer of violent extremism that has ravaged so many parts of the Muslim world. And it is no exaggeration to say that humanity's future depends on us uniting against those who would divide us along the fault lines of tribe or sect, race or religion. But this is not simply a matter of words. Collectively, we must take concrete steps to address the danger posed by religiously motivated fanatics and the trends that fuel their recruitment. The terrorist group known as ISIL must be degraded and ultimately destroyed. This group has terrorized all who they come across in Iraq and Syria. Mothers, sisters, daughters have been subjected to rape as a weapon of war. Innocent children have been gunned down. Bodies have been dumped in mass graves. Religious minorities have been starved to death. In the most horrific crimes imaginable, innocent human beings have been beheaded with videos of the atrocity distributed to shock the conscience of the world. No God condones this terror. It means bringing people of different faiths together. All religions have been attacked by extremists from within at some point. And all people of faith have a responsibility to lift up the value at the heart of all great religions. Do unto thy neighbor as you would have done unto yourself.
And new information tonight on the 9/11 type terror plot planned against the U.S. Were they planning to get bombs past airport security and onto planes headed here, using toothpaste and special clothing? ABC's chief investigative correspondent Brian Ross here with more on the group planning that attack. And Brian, it would seem they were intently focused on planes.
That's absolutely right, David. But U.S. officials tell us tonight they are confident they have disrupted the Khorasan group's planned attack on the U.S., at least for now.
And other European nations are joining Arab states in the global coalition against ISIS. French planes are already bombing ISIS targets in Iraq. The Netherlands says 6 F-16 fighter jets will carry out airstrikes, and 250 troops will train Iraqi and Kurdish forces. And Denmark and Belgium also announced plans to send fighter jets for the next phase of the air campaign.
But is this the same as a civilizational collapse? I mean, the fact that police states have crumbled and these Islamist movements, some as extreme as ISIS, have emerged in the vacuum. Is it the same as saying that the entire Arab civilization has essentially crumbled and that in our lifetimes we won't see it resurrect itself?
Yeah, my point was I'm indicting the political culture of the Arabs. I'm not saying that we don't produce great poetry or whatever, but essentially the political culture. Look at just, you know, at Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. And you see one front from Basra at the mouth of the Persian Gulf to Beirut on the Mediterranean, where there is a Shia-Sunni bloodletting. Look at Egypt. The divisions and the polarizations in Egypt are unprecedented. Libya is in a state of war. Yemen is collapsing. Bahrain is teetering. We've never seen this Sunni-Shia divide. We've never seen the collapse of three major societies. Yeah. Egypt, although not totally collapsed, but marginalized. And then you have Syria and Iraq. We've never seen this in modern times.
The people of the world now look to us here. The alarm bells keep ringing. The alarm bells keep ringing. The alarm bells keep ringing.